Welcome to the Wing Space podcast, a place to take up space, a space for you to settle in, sit back, relax, and focus a little bit on health, wellness, faith, family, and this crazy thing called life.
This podcast is not a replacement for mental health treatment or professional health care. In case of crisis or emergency, please contact your local healthcare provider or dial 911.
Hey there, and welcome to the Wing Space podcast, a place to take up space. I am excited to have a conversation today with our certified nutrition specialist, Tracy Pritchard, as we are diving into fall and all things fall related. Our meals change, our snacks change, and so we're going to have a conversation today that might spice up how you are feeding and fueling your body this fall. Before we jump into that, Tracy, welcome to the podcast. Welcome back to the podcast for season 4.
Great to be back.
And if we have new listeners who have not heard you speak on our podcast before, can you just take a couple minutes and share who you are and what you do, and then we'll jump into this topic.
Sure. So I have a master's degree in human nutrition, and I am a certified nutrition specialist licensed to practice in the state of Maryland. So what I do clinically is I see one-on-one clients at Hope and Healing Therapy, both in person and virtually. And we do what's called medical nutrition therapy. And that is taking a look at the whole person. We look at preferences, current dietary intake. I can review conventional or specialty labs, make recommendations on dietary changes, as well as potential supplements if needed or wanted, as well as lifestyle changes. A lot of times what we eat and how we eat is also related to sleep patterns and exercise. So it's really a holistic approach to nutrition.
Awesome. And it's been really great to have you on the team. When you first joined us, we were doing blogs and podcasts, and really you were filling us with information. And I know that our one-on-one clients who are having the opportunity to work with you are getting a lot of great information. And so for today, just a little taste, I guess, pardon the pun, a little taste of what's available to us locally and what's seasonally available. For me and for many people, what I cook for dinner looks different when it starts to get colder outside and schedules change and things like that. Share a little bit with us in terms of ideas about how we can make that shift.
Well, I just heard a whole lot of things in there, starting with schedule changes. And I know for a lot of us, fall sports brings a whole nother dimension to that. We've got some families eating dinner at 4 p.m. and other families, they need to eat at 7 or 8 p.m. So it really depends there. But when I think about that busy fall sports cycle, I really start thinking about working smarter and not harder, and relying on things like crock pots or Instapots and leftovers. Of course, we've discussed there's some families or people that don't like leftovers. They wouldn't survive in my house necessarily, or I'd have to rethink the way I do it. But when I start thinking about those crock pot meals and things like that, I'm thinking about soups and stews and chilies. And in my world, those are 3 very different meals. Some people don't like brothy soup. Some people like the thicker stews. Chili is such a wonderful food for the fall because there are endless options. I could probably fill up the rest of this podcast just talking about chili, but I'd like to take this opportunity to say, everyone's got their favorite chili, and there's endless debates on should chili have meat and beans, just meat, no beans, any vegetables, no vegetables. So really, chili is a great way to get a healthy, balanced meal in one pot because you have a protein. You can have some complex carbohydrates if you do choose to use the beans or potatoes. You could sneak in some vegetables if your family's not real big on them. You could get a little bit of onion or carrots or celery in there. And it can just cook all day. And I find that if I'm cooking 1 crock pot full, I might as well do 2 and have leftovers, because chili actually freezes really well. And it's always a relief to open my freezer and be like, oh yeah, I've got that leftover chili in there. So if you don't mind, I'd like to take the opportunity to at least offer some ideas to our listeners who are like, yeah, I don't know. Chili's okay, or I like this one kind. But again, I like different tastes and flavors. So when I think of the traditional chili, I might think of a ground meat, probably ground beef, red beans, tomato based. Some people might not like that. So there's white bean chicken chilies. You can do like turkey, black bean chilies. I even found a I'm from Buffalo, New York, so I like things that are buffalo with buffalo sauce, but a buffalo chickpea chicken chili. Of course, if we have any vegetarian listeners or people who are looking for a lighter, less expensive chili, you can do a vegetarian chili with lentils. There really are endless options. So for listeners who might think like, man, I just want to press the easy button, but I don't want to wear my family out on my one chili recipe, maybe on Sundays, each Sunday you find a new chili recipe and you kind of go for it there. And, in this whole world of the charcuterie board, I actually saw a picture that my kids' eyes lit up when I showed them, and there was the pot of chili or crock pot of chili on the end. But they essentially took all the toppings for chili and made a beautiful charcuterie board. Of course, I would recommend a plain Greek yogurt over sour cream just to add some protein and make it lighter. Guacamole and avocado are really healthy fats. You can add other vegetables, other toppings. Cheese, any kind of cheese is fine. Adds a little bit of, taste and protein. And we have local dairies here in Southern Maryland where you can go get your, different styles of cheeses if you'd like to. And chips. I mean, who doesn't like a good corn chip with their chili? If possible, I like to upgrade to some of the healthier brands with, if there's less ingredients and you can pronounce all the ingredients. I know a shout out for like the Siete brand or some of those. But, if you've got your favorite chip, just have a couple, give it some crunch, and throw it on your charcuterie board.
We have a non-bean eater in our house, and I will give a shout out to my kids. They are not picky eaters, but, we all have preferences, and so I have a non-bean eater, and the idea of making chili without beans just seems absurd to me. But the poor guy is going to pick out all the beans, and how miserable of a meal is that? So, I may be tapping your brain for a good non-bean chili recipe because, soup. I'm like you, soups and stews. You make it on one day, and you can, munch on it for lunches or dinners all week. You freeze it, you keep it for later. Really great way to throw in, lots of extra vegetables. And you're right. We could probably spend this whole episode talking about soups and stews and chilies.
Well, I'll throw it out there. Just if we call a chili paleo, it inherently will not have beans in it. So if you were to Google, because Google can be our friend for ideas, a paleo chili, it's going to just have proteins and vegetables in it. So you'll still find endless versions of that. I want to throw in one more plug for chili here is when folks get together in the fall, there's a lot of potlucks, whether it's tailgating or, just after sports and things like that. You want to have your go-to dish, which could be other than chili. I mean, there's a lot of things with the seasonal vegetables or side dishes. But chili would be something that you could take that, then you get a good entree, and or why not turn it into a chili cook-off? You can have a sign-up sheet so your friends or your family can bring different things, and someone will bring a beanless chili for one of your kids. I'm sure you could bring that one, and other people might have the vegetarian or even vegan or turkey or beef. So it's really a neat way to try a bunch of things. And I don't know that I've met many people who don't enjoy going to a chili cook-off, even if they're not big chili eaters.
The chili cook-off is a great idea, a fun activity to do with friends or family. And, it reminds me also that as the busy traveling of the summer winds down and people are more home-based in the fall and into the winter, family gatherings and kind of those potluck events tend to happen a little bit more. What are some ideas other than the chili, some other ideas that people might consider as their go-to dish to take to a potluck here in the fall going into the winter?
Well, so that's another great question. Depends. Like, do you want to do something seasonal and say, hey, I'm going to go to the farmer's market on Saturday and see what they have and then come home and find a recipe to go with it? Sometimes I think, are people getting tired of the dish that I always bring? But it's often different groups of people that say, will you please bring your large leafy green salad? So, I have the same bowl that I bring to every, potluck that I go to. And I get the leafy greens either locally or from the store and add in what I can. Sometimes in the fall, I might add pumpkin seeds or walnuts instead of something that I would have done in the summer. Salads can even take some great apples. So if you get some local apples, you can dice those up. So I personally often bring that because a lot of people are not signing up to bring side dishes that contain vegetables or leafy greens, and most people are happy to see those there. But there's really a lot of different things you can do and easy. Like root vegetables are really popular in the fall and going into the winter. So things like butternut squash and sweet potatoes. Those are really easy to just throw in the oven on a sheet pan and roast up. You can add different seasonings, spices, herbs, however you want to do that. Pumpkin's obviously very popular. I'll probably talk about pumpkin beverages at some point, I would guess today. But there's pumpkin breads and muffins and soups and stews that pumpkin can go into as well to give that seasonal flavor. And you can do that in a nutrient-dense way as well. I mean, there's definitely versions of pumpkin bread and those muffins that you can use more as a side dish than as a dessert.
So you brought up pumpkin, so I guess we have to briefly have the conversation of, are you a pumpkin person or are you an apple person? Because for some reason, there seems to be this conversation that you have to be one or the other. I myself am both. I mean, I think it's great. And we have local places where you can get pumpkins, you can get apples, and I think it's great to utilize local farms to gather those things. We were talking about your leafy green salad, and I know for me, sometimes I go to the grocery store and the selection is not quite as varied as I would like. So before we jump into the pumpkin or apple discussion, what are some ideas for people who may be interested in that variety and don't have what they might want at the local grocery store?
So when I moved to Southern Maryland back in 2011, a friend introduced me to a farm, and they have what's called a community-supported agriculture. Now, there are several in the area, and a lot of times they are growing leafy greens that are very robust. Maybe even some are spicy, some are not. They may have different kales, different spinach leaves. I'm going to look off a list here because I have ones that are crops that are grown, harvested in the fall and winter locally here. Swiss chard, Chinese thick stem mustard greens, again, spicy. And sometimes you're like, whoa, where did that come from? And we realize how blah some of the, the greens that we get in the salad kits or in the bin at the grocery store can be. Purple Siberian kale, Napini, which is kind of like this little, you think of it from a fancy restaurant, but it's something we can get locally and just kind of saute up. Now, I would get this box like once a week and I would be like, what is this, right? So an email would come along and say, hey, here's what these things are. Here's how long they last. Here's some things you can do with them. And as a family that likes green smoothies, these greens don't do great in smoothies because they're really spicy or sometimes just savory. So, smoothies take spinach well, maybe some kales, but a lot of these greens, even like the radish greens, beet greens, do really well just sauteed up in a frying pan. Or if I get a lot of them and I'm overwhelmed sometimes by a lot of is there such a thing as too many greens, I'll chop them and freeze them. And then when I'm making the soup, stews, and chilies, I just throw a bunch of it in there and it's already ready to go. But a whole nother level in the fact of I'm not willing to give up this box. It's something that I've done. Let me say that the box that I'm referring to is once a week I pick up a box locally, either at a farm or at a pickup site that truly forces me find something to do with these, seasonal local vegetables because I don't want to waste them and I'm curious. So I would definitely suggest that for people who haven't gotten out of their comfort zone and maybe only always eat spinach or romaine or kale. There's a lot of different forms of greens.
Having a partnership with a local farm is great, whether you're in the Southern Maryland area or not. Again, Google can be your friend. You can reach out, you can find some of those and get connected. You and I have talked about that before, and I'm actually going to put it on my little to-do list here that I need to reach back out to one of those farms to get that set up for myself, because I will agree with you. I am less likely to buy random leafy greens at the grocery store, but if I end up with a box of it, I'm going to figure out a way to use them. And sometimes, like you said, putting them in a stew or, even chopping them up real fine and putting them in a spaghetti sauce or something is a great way to utilize them. Okay, so here we go. Pumpkins and apples, right? Those are the fall favorites. People think about all of the traditional, the pumpkin drinks, pumpkin or apple drinks. We've got desserts, we've got breads. Are there ideas to think outside of the box in terms of what people typically think?
Sure. So like if you were making some type of pork chop and, maybe in the past you've used a broth or water to deglaze the pan, why not use some apple cider and give it some extra flavor? My kids and, we like apple cider, but if you're just drinking it, you're really just drinking juice, which is sugar. But who doesn't like a nice glass of apple cider or warm apple cider? But then instead of just drinking all of it, why not use it to cook with, almost like a condiment to give things flavors, and the house will smell real nice doing something like that. You would be surprised, along with the apple cider gravy, there are hundreds of recipes out there of savory cooking with apple cider. So again, if that's something you're like, ooh, I think I might like that, Google it. Find something. Yours might be with pork chops. Somebody else might be with chicken. I'm sure there's vegetarian versions. Same with things like pumpkin. Too often, I think sweet potatoes get all the glory. And I love sweet potatoes, in the fall, but why not roast up some pumpkin? You can buy a whole pumpkin and slice it. You can even rinse off and roast your own pumpkin seeds. In the spirit of fall, if you're not ready to commit to whole pumpkin, like a real pumpkin, just be sure that you're buying 100% pure pumpkin and not pumpkin pie filling, because those are two very different things. Pumpkin is full of fiber and nutrients. Pumpkin can go in smoothies. You can even mix it with some, plain Greek yogurt or like a low sugar vanilla yogurt, protein powders, as opposed to a sugary pumpkin latte. So again, there's half the world that loves those and half that does not. But if you're the half that loves it and you're like, oh boy, here comes my pumpkin lattes, and you're thinking, all the sugar, but you just love them, why not reinvent something and make it part of your daily routine where you can enjoy it with the either, puree your own pumpkin or the pumpkin puree and in the blender or in a super stew. Same with apple. Like we said, a lot of the desserts get credit or take over the pumpkin and apples, but apples in a crock pot will make your house smell delicious. Those can be a wonderful side dish. And too often we save things like that for like holidays, right? Like, why aren't we eating those apples, especially if we can get them locally? I know there's an apple farm, north of us, and a variety of apples. A lot of people don't realize that there are so many different kinds of apples. So something your family could do is do an apple tasting, like go buy 5 different types and taste them, comment. Some are sweeter than others, some are crunchier than others, some have that tart flavor. So there's a lot of exploration that you can do with food anytime, but especially with those fall flavors.
Given me an idea to do an apple tasting. Our family loves apples, and we kind of stick to one kind of apple, but why not, branch out and see what else is there. Such great information that you shared with us so far. And for anyone that is thinking, gosh, these sound like would be some great recipes, you're interested, make sure that you're getting our newsletter. You can go to our website, hopehealingtherapy.com, and sign up for our newsletter, because Tracy is always putting in recipes to our newsletter. And so you can go back to the old newsletters. There's also blogs that Tracy writes that oftentimes include ideas and different recipes. Great information. Make sure you are following along for that. I do want to take a quick break, and then when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about, in terms of food prep and routines, how that looks a little different going into the fall, so that all of these wonderful things we've talked about can easily be incorporated into your day. So stick around. We'll be right back after a quick message about our upcoming services.
Are you a yogi in Southern Maryland looking for a place to practice on Thursday mornings? Look no further than Gentle Yoga with Lori Bruce at Hope and Healing in Leonardtown. A certified yoga therapist, Lori brings over 2 decades of yoga training and teaching to her classes. Gentle Yoga with Lori is suitable for all levels. Join us in person or tune in from home, as all Thursday morning classes will be available virtually. Space is limited, so reserve your spot today at loribruceyoga.com/schedule.
All right, welcome back to the Wing Space Podcast. We are finishing up our conversation with Tracy Pritchard, and we've talked about some very yummy, delicious ideas in terms of seasonal foods, go-to meals, potluck ideas. All that sounds great, but there might be people that are saying, well, the days are shorter, the schedules are different, I'm tired, I'm fill in the blank. So from a wellness perspective, how do we make changes for the fall so that we can continue to focus on our nutrition, but also make sure that we're staying hydrated and getting good sleep and all those things?
Well, since you said hydrated, I'm going to start with there. I've noticed that some people say, well, hey, I do great with my water intake in the summer, but then it tends to fall off as the weather gets, oh, thanks for drinking water, gets a little cooler. Well, guess what? Like, warm water is still H2O. So maybe as the weather gets cooler, still have your water bottle. But if you notice that you're not meeting your daily water goals, consider tea, especially those herbal teas, the chamomile, lavender teas, you name it. There's many, many out there. Those absolutely count towards water intake. So why not sip on tea all day? I'll just say be careful if you're having caffeinated tea to not be drinking it too late in the day because that could affect your sleep. But it's for a lot of people, it's harder to stay hydrated when it's cold out. So you can do that. And while I'm mentioning water, just beverages in general, I know we touched on like pumpkin lattes and coffees or apple cider. People love like chai lattes or chai teas. Again, if those are your fall beverage go-to, try to find the healthiest version you can. I mean, there are companies out there that make better versions with all the spices in it, or you can make all your spices yourself and do that. But give yourself permission to enjoy it, not just as a treat, but those can be absolutely a part of a healthy diet, lifestyle, and pattern if you're doing it correctly. Like hot cocoa, there's certainly ultra processed ones that have ingredients you can't read in it. But if you make it from scratch and you have cocoa powder, cacao powder, some of these other brands, there's even high protein hot chocolate. There is a way to do that that you can feel good about. So I would encourage people to, again, we're always saying rethink your drink, and the fall is no exception for staying hydrated and transitioning those sugary beverages into something, that's not so bad.
And what I'm hearing you say is we're rethinking drinks that have water as their base. So, the teas that you're taking water and you're flavoring it basically. Mm-hmm. So that we're working on our water intake. We're not necessarily working on fluid intake because there's lots of options out there that are not water-based.
Sure. So even chai, like if you're doing a chai tea, you can buy a really nice chai tea bag and steep it in water. I mean, that's still counting towards your water intake. And then you get the benefits of some of those herbs and spices as well. I think you asked also just about prep. I know, in the summertime, people are grilling out more and they're not necessarily turning their oven on, but in the fall, we're more likely to do that. So, if the hustle and bustle of whether it's your own fall sports or your kids' fall sports, or like me, I like to watch, NFL football on Sunday, Monday, Thursday, if it's not too late, because that gets in the way of my bedtime. So I have to put boundaries on that. Maybe on a Saturday or Sunday, having a crock pot going and a sheet pan meal going and just prepping stuff that you can use all week. I mean, we always talk about food prep, but, in the winter, you might just not have the energy for it. Especially as the time starts shifting, if you're tired in the morning or it's getting dark a little earlier, you may want to use that time when you get home from work to go for a walk before it gets dark, and then dinner's ready if you're just heating up some kind of leftovers. Or maybe you made parts of your dinner on the weekend. For example, maybe on the weekends you consider like prepping some rice or quinoa, and you could use a bone broth or something else to make it even more nutrient dense and add protein. And then all you'd have to do is still throw like some chicken in the oven, or maybe you still use your grill or Blackstone or whatever it is, but just keeping it really easy. One thing I work with my clients on a lot is educating on, meal building. Like it's back to the basics. Like, do you have a protein? Do you have some kind of complex carbohydrate that will keep you full, whether it's like a sweet potato, some brown rice or quinoa, maybe fruit, and then just some non-starchy vegetables. That's your leafy greens. Maybe it's a bag of frozen green beans that night, just something that you can build a meal with.
It doesn't have to be complicated, and it doesn't have to be hard. Sometimes we overthink these things. I actually do the Sunday, the meal prep that you were suggesting, and I've sometimes got some rice going on the stove, and I've got the oven is cooking the chicken, and I'm prepping some vegetables. The TV's on, so now that football has started, I'm watching a game or two while I'm getting all those things done, and it's nice easily opening up the fridge and things are already done, whether it's for lunches or whether it's for the evening, and everybody has to do what works for them. But certainly it looks a little different once we're back in school and sports and all those things, for sure.
Sure, and I like to encourage people to get one meal ahead. Like if you think, I have a plan for the week. Well, a plan's great until life happens, right? Whether it's something you get stuck at work or your kid gets sick. So maybe you have a plan for the week, but I would still encourage people to throw anything in a crock pot on Saturday or Sunday. And if by Tuesday you're like, I'm not sure I'm going to use it, I mean, you could use it for lunches instead of dinners. You could freeze it. You could take it to a friend who maybe you know is having a hard time. But I've never regretted getting just one meal ahead. So that's definitely something I'd encourage. And I'd say I have clients who are like, oh, I've done this whole meal prep before, and we were tired of spending 6 hours on Sunday. And I was like, 6 hours? Their meals must have been amazing. But by the time they, made their list and went grocery shopping and came home and prepped it, it became drudgery. So again, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. Maybe your meal prep for the week is, I'm going to prep 2 meals for the week. It doesn't have to be every single thing for every single meal and snack, but just start getting into a groove on, using, whether it's the weekends or, if you are at home waiting to go drive a carpool, like, can you cook? Quinoa takes 12 minutes to cook. Like, once you boil the water, it's 12 minutes. Can you just make it and be like, I'll deal with it later, and later Google, what can I do with it, right? And then throw some things in for a quinoa salad, or maybe it's just a side dish, but start thinking about using those small blocks of time to prep a little bit. It doesn't have to be all of it at one time, because honestly, I would stop doing that too. That sounds overwhelming to me.
And I think sometimes people underestimate the ease of sheet pan dinners too. That's one of my go-tos, especially on a week where things are a little bit busy. On like a Monday or a Wednesday, we do a sheet pan, and then we've got either leftovers or we've got lunches. And, they've got prepackaged vegetables in the produce section if I'm really tight on time. And so I can throw some broccoli and cauliflower and carrots on there. There's some little potatoes that are already small enough that I can, how do we make that easier, right? You can easily just stick that on a pan, put it in the oven, dinner's ready. And it's easy enough also for older children that are capable of preheating an oven, putting a pan in, setting a timer, and pulling it out, right? There's not any meal prep that they have to do. If, hey, I'm running late, go ahead and preheat the oven for me type thing. There's tons of ideas out there on Google, Pinterest, whatever you use, for different kinds of sheet pans for, I would love Brussels sprouts and sweet potatoes all the time, but, some people like to spice it up a little bit differently. So, yeah, planning ahead is always helpful because you never know when life is going to happen.
I got into a groove of my busiest day of the week. My fast food meal was probably our healthiest meal of the week because salmon takes 12 minutes. If you have the nice big fillet of salmon, you can season it with salt and pepper, or, whether it's a store-bought or homemade teriyaki type sauce. And once you put the oven on, about 400, 425, depending on how you like it, it's 12 minutes. So you can do that and maybe put some vegetables around it, like some asparagus would cook quickly, or like you said, the broccoli cauliflower. And if you don't want to take the time that day to cook rice, they sell rice in packets that you can just open up and heat within 90 seconds. I like to pour those into a glass dish or put them in a frying pan, but really easy. So having things in your pantry to augment those meals as well is super helpful.
Absolutely. And, we said this at the beginning, and I think before we even hit record today, we said that, we could probably talk forever about this. And the good news is we have a couple more episodes this season that you and I are going to chat about some other ideas regarding nutrition. But before we finish up for today, any other last minute thoughts that you had to just kind of tie things up for our listeners?
I think for a lot of us, just like writing down, and it doesn't have to be perfect, but your general idea of what your meals are going to be so that you can shop for stuff. But let's face it, sometimes what you bought for a stir fry might turn into a salad, or you bought it for a sheet pan dinner and you did something else with it. But just having a general idea of what could be on certain days, it actually relieves stress to just know that you already have that plan, even if you don't wind up executing all of it. Because, if you don't plan, you're planning to fail with it. And I also want to encourage listeners that a plan might say, eat out. Like Wednesday night, that might be part of your plan. And something I like to do with clients is like, all right, so you're working on all this and you're making all this great food at home. Where do you eat out? And a lot of times it is more of the traditional fast food type places. So we look at, like, are there other menus or other places where you can find a more balanced meal or something that can just fit right in with a healthy lifestyle? And there certainly are. It's just knowledge is power, and, being aware of how to swap some things out. So leftovers is absolutely part of meal planning. Eating out is part of meal planning, but just having a vision for the week, because you don't want to cook a bunch of food on Sunday if you have a work meeting Monday, a dinner, and Tuesday you're, traveling, and then, you don't want to waste food. So just knowing what your week looks like for, for your meals.
I've also found writing it down so that my family knows what the plan is helpful too. So, whether you have a board or just a piece of paper, or if you share a Google Calendar or something, certainly there's been times when my husband has texted me or called me and said, okay, I see XYZ on the plan for tonight. What do you want me to do to get it started? Super helpful that he already knows, we're going to have baked potatoes for dinner tonight or something. And okay, I'm going to get the oven heated up. So writing it down, number one, then you know the plan, but also your family knows the plan and can maybe pitch in, but they also, it eliminates the what's for dinner, right? Because they can see it right there, what's for dinner. So,
well, and I love that because I have teenagers and they will now send me recipes and be like, can we make this? And some of the recipes are really great. Some are, I'm like, sure. But I always say sure because I love that they're engaged with it and they know that I can add those things to my shopping list and we can use it, whether it's for a snack or for, add to a meal. So getting everybody involved, because the reality is as these kids grow, they don't know it yet, but part of adulting is having to come up with dinner every single night or a plan.
Every single night. Yes, absolutely. Goodness.
Yep.
All right, Tracy. Well, it was great to talk to you. As always, if our listeners, if you guys have questions or thoughts and you want to share them, you can email me, Jennifer@hopehealingtherapy.com. You can also email Tracy. Hers is Tracy@hopehealingtherapy.com. You can send us a DM on our socials. We're always interested in what your ideas are. Here's another idea. If you're creating a meal and you want to tag us in something, feel free. We'd love to see what you're putting on your plate and how you're incorporating healthy choices in your everyday. So again, thanks for listening. We're always glad to have you here and have a great day.